Okay, hi everybody. So this time let's try that again. So last week we looked at kind of freehand sketching. So we did a few little basic exercises. I got my notes out. So what did we do? So yeah, we were drawing shapes. We did straight lines, squares, rectangles, kind of oblique sketching, isometric sketching, text and hatching. So this week we're going to just kind of move on a little bit more onto some bit more detailed things. Focus in there a bit. Okay, so we're going to use the information we practiced last week, kind of put together. So we did lots of things on straight lines. So we're going to draw something like this. So this is kind of just freehand sketch, and I kind of just did this quickly just to kind of get an idea of what we're going to do today. So we'll draw some of this. So we'll draw a few blocks and a I-beam, and then add some detail to it. So we want to use these as almost like your kind of tutorial notes or revision notes. These drawings. So we can actually start writing our instructions up here first of all, so we can practice our text. So when we're drawing isometric drawings, again we did this last semester, was before, instead of actually just drawing the details. So I'll just bring this in quickly so we can see. So instead of trying to draw all these details individually, first of all, it's always good to kind of draw an outer crate, so just kind of get an idea of proportion and size. Now what we're doing here today isn't actually going to be to any scale or it's going to be any particular dimension, so it's all going to be freehand. But we still want to actually just use the crate method just to kind of get the outline of the shape. So for this one, first of all, instead of actually drawing all these lines, first of all, what we're going to do first of all is actually just draw kind of a crate shape, and then we can actually start filling in the details. For this one, obviously, this type of block here is actually just a crate, then we just add the details afterwards. Then we have a brick up here with kind of a recess on top. But again, first thing I'm going to do, we'll write down our instructions. So go back to your A3 sheet. So again, just kind of get the page comfortable. You might, if you want to twist it a little around, I'm going to twist mine a little bit so you can see it, so I can draw a bit better. So step one is going to be drawing a crate. So really just a bit practicing your text, which we were doing last week. Actually, I will draw bigger. So I said write whatever size you're comfortable doing, just so it's nice and clear, but I'll draw a little bit bigger so we can see it in the video. So draw outline crate. Oh, my pencil broke again. Draw a crate and just so step one, draw a crate or the outline. Step two is going to be draw the actual outline of your shape. So draw your pencil needs to be sharpened a little bit already, but so draw a detailed outline. Let's give this a bit of a hair. And again, so when you're doing this, I want you guys to write this as well. So let's practice your text, and then you can actually use these drawings as notes. Next thing we're going to do is, so once you're happy, then go over the outline in a dark shade. So again, if you feel you need the guidelines, draw them in. I'm kind of used to doing this, so I'm not going to use the guidelines. You may think I need them, but that's another issue. Once happy, go over outline. Dark shade, and then last one, I'm going to apply hatching or color. So yeah, not the tidiest, but it gets the point across. So usually I think there's people that recommended actual exact distances between these, but obviously if you're doing freehand sketching, you're not going to be measuring it out because it defeats the purpose of freehand sketching. So, but you want to kind of leave a bit of a gap between the lines, just so it makes things a bit clearer. I just noticed, looking at mine, this text here looks a bit bigger than these ones. I think it was because my pencil, the nib of it broke, so it got a bit blunter. So just one of the things, but you know, it's not the end of the world. Okay, so what we'll do first of all, we start off easy. So we're going to divide this as we'll draw three or four different things here, kind of big drawings here. So we'll roughly kind of mark out the center. So roughly here we'll kind of keep all the drawings. So we'll kind of keep this space down here for something a bit later on. So we'll just use the center part of the page for the moment. Again, it's an isometric thing we're going to be doing. So a lot of sketches you might be doing in engineering is going to be isometric. Remember, I'm going to be using a dark shade pencil just for this video so you can see in the video, but when you are doing it, I want you to use a lighter shade. So that's your 4H, 2H or a H pencil. And then at the end, once you're happy with the shape, then go over the dark line, as we say here. But for me, I'm just using the 5B just so it shows up clearer on the video. So we'll draw a concrete block, a standard block. Again, there's no size or scale or anything to this one, so we'll just draw it roughly. So I'm going to twist the page a little bit. So isometrically, we're trying to draw it roughly, so it's roughly about this size here. Again, exact size doesn't matter, as long as it fits on the page, it's okay. So my sheet is moving a little bit. Okay, make sure you're taped down. I didn't have any tape here, but we'll just keep going. So draw a horizontal axis. So remember, when you're drawing straight lines, instead of kind of drawing it from the wrist, kind of lock your elbow in place, lock your wrist in place and just kind of move with your elbow, just so you can get much better straight lines doing it that way. So we're going to draw like a concrete block, so it's going to be kind of recessed a bit longer than the front view. So trying to keep it straight. I'll just twist my chair just for the video's purpose, but when you're drawing, feel free to twist it around. Just get the page comfortable. So if you're trying to draw on everything perfectly straight, it's just going to be awkward. It's going to be harder to do, and it's not going to look as good. So twist the page a little bit. So again, isometric, we got a horizontal axis. What I said is kind of keep the thing straight, so we'll start that up again. So we got a horizontal axis, and then we're going to draw a vertical. So now we're going to draw our recessed lines, kind of going back a little bit. So it's kind of roughly at 30 degrees. So again, if you're not sure, have a look at your protractor and then come back to it. But you know, take a guess. If you've seen enough isometric drawings, you can kind of roughly guess what it is. And if it's a little bit off, as long as we're all roughly a little bit off or all the same angle, it should look good. So I'll draw a long one. So you have to be careful how long you go, because if you go really far back, you could end up going up into the text up here. So I'll just roughly go some of this. So again, I'll get a here. I'll go with the horizontal line. You'll figure out what works for you. And then it's already showing me that this bottom line isn't that straight, but sure, it's okay. Fill in the gap. I'm going to be slightly hitting into the text, so docking myself marks already. So again, the proportion doesn't make a difference. It's just a freehand sketch. Just practice and draw isometrically. Since lines don't reach up, just kind of bring them together. So you can see I'm already going into my text. So we'll just stop there so we don't have to go over our notes. So we have our little block, and it's, you know, it's fine. We had no shape or anything what we're actually aiming for. So what we have here will do the job. So now what we can do is just to kind of start adding a bit more artistic work or kind of a bit more detail to it to make it look a bit more like a concrete block. So we can start adding things like shading. So remember last week we were talking about how to do shading, so we can do like kind of with the side of your pencil or kind of do lots of lines or whatever it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this kind of lots of little lines here just to get it added in. So it's almost like colouring it in grey. So let's do the same. And just use my finger down here so the pencil doesn't go over the line. Again, just keep it nice and light. Doesn't matter if you go over it too much. Now for the side here, I'm drawing kind of vertical lines. So it's kind of vertical, so they're parallel to this vertical line here. So I'm going to do the same here. So I'm going to be doing vertical lines the whole way up here. And just use my. It was freehand sketching, so it doesn't have to be perfect. So if you're going to be doing these, you're going to be doing these in a meeting or out in the site. So you know it's not going to be works of art. We're not going to be hanging them up in the museum unless you become a very famous engineer. Then I will be keeping your hand drawings and I'll be selling them on eBay or something when you're famous. What do we do? Actually, no. The longer lines are a bit more tricky to do, so I'll actually do the shorter one. So I'll just twist it around, try and get comfortable. So these are actually all individual strokes, not kind of going back and forth. I'm actually going across, back up, across and back up. So again, we'll have to go around the text because I made a mess of that, but that's okay. So we have our rough outline. So then remember we were talking about the hatching last week. So this is going to be a concrete block. So we can start doing hatching. So the hatching for concrete, if you see in AutoCAD, is actually just drawing little triangles, random at random axes, and little lines and circles. This is kind of represent the stones and the stuff that's in the concrete. So again, it's kind of, you can draw these dark because you can't really mess them up. So push down and kind of draw a few triangles at random intervals all over the place. Do some over here. And on top we'll do the same. You know, you don't want to go overboard. Then we'll just draw some random shaped circles, ellipses. And then we shall draw just some, again, a few random lines here. Okay, so we have a bit of a concrete hatch here. Now these hatch are kind of a bit darker than the actual lines. This is why we're going to go over the line now again. So I'm going to get the darker pencil, which I've already had, and then just to go over the line, just to kind of highlight it a bit more. Again, these should be a bit easier to do now because you have the line in place, so you're just kind of drawing over them. So we have our outline. So now we have our concrete block there. So you know, if you want, you can add a bit more colouring shade there, whatever you think. Again, if you want to be a bit more artistic, we can do a little bit of shading. You know, it's always good to have a few detail. So when you're doing shading, say this block is actually sitting on a table, so obviously underneath it's going to be a little bit of shade. And concrete is generally not perfectly square because it's generally, you know, a bit smoother around the edge. So you can actually add a little bit of shade here. So if you want to add a shade underneath this, for example, so just underneath the vertical axis or the kind of the receding axis here, just going to get my pencil and kind of go back and forth just a bit lighter, and just kind of keep going back and forth and just kind of get a bit lighter the further away you get from the block. So start off a bit darker inside there and then kind of bring it back here, and you'll see kind of just that little gradient actually all of a sudden adds a nice little bit of shade. And then I'll do the same over here, a bit darker along close to it, and then just as we get further away from it, just kind of go a bit lighter. You see this very simple technique, and all of a sudden it just adds a lot more realism and detail to your actual block. So, you know, this is kind of a slightly more artistic thing, so it's your own preference, but try and add in the kind of, definitely will add in the hatch and have a practice doing these shadings, so it's good practice. So drawing big things, this is actually a bit more difficult. So we'll do an in-between one, we'll do a little small brick here now. So again, I'll draw my horizontal line. Again, make sure you switch back to your H pencil, your 4H or whatever, 2H, whatever you're using. So again, we'll use this one's a bit smaller. Actually, I'll go a bit smaller because I want to make sure I don't run out of space again. So I want to do a bit more detailed one here. So again, we want that roughly 30 degrees. Then it's just drawing lines parallel to each other, freehand. Again, technique I'm using now, instead of actually drawing kind of one straight line, I'm actually using kind of a brush stroke. So either or, I just noticed actually from doing this video, I'm kind of switched between the two of them, to be honest. So, but it's fine for these type of sketching. I'm kind of using more of a brush stroke. And again, if your lines aren't looking right, so once you've got the outline done, this is what we're talking about, our crate. So this is our draw our crate. So this is what our first step is. So we've got our outline crate. I'm happy enough with this. If yours is looking a bit off, so if one of your lines is a bit not exactly parallel, like it doesn't have to be perfect, but if it's noticeably slightly off, just rub it out, do it again, keep going over it again. It only takes 2 seconds to actually rub it out and go over it again. So no harm just to practice. So with this brick, it's going to be a recessed brick with that kind of clips together. So we'll draw the recess up the top here. So it's actually drawing a line. It's like basically offsetting the outer line. So I'm on step 2, so we're just trying to add in a bit more detail. Here we have our little recess, and we can just draw a little line going in from the corners and then just join them up a bit nice straight line. So this is kind of a little recess into the brick, so then our other bricks would kind of slot into there. So straightforward enough, and it's it could be a red brick or a concrete block or a cinder block, so we can do a little bit of shading. So we'll do something a little bit different here. So instead of actually kind of doing these big lines, because it's a bit smaller, the smaller your drawing is, the more detail you can actually add. So I'll just add a bit more, kind of keep the lines a bit closer together throughout. And what you can do, if you want to actually play around with shading a bit, you can do one side of the block a bit darker than the other one. That kind of would kind of show or represent kind of the light hitting it from one side and not the other side. So we'll do this side a little bit darker, and then I'll do this side a little bit lighter. Again, a good way to do this to make sure you're kind of getting the right shade. You can just swap between different shades pencils, or you can just a bit less pressure when you're drawing it. And this one I'll just go around, add a little bit of shade. And just use my finger to kind of keep it relatively in the lines. So we have a nice little block here, and it's a concrete block, so we can kind of add a few little random marks here like this. So obviously our bricks are going to be slightly not exactly perfect out on the side. So here we have a little brick, and we'll do a little bit of practice for the shading again. A bit darker at the bottom, and then you kind of come away from it a bit lighter. So there we have our little brick. So again, if yours doesn't look like this, kind of rub out the bits that are a bit off and go back over it. It only takes a few minutes to actually do it. So the next one we're going to look at is going to be probably the more complicated one. It's an I-beam. Actually, just looking at it, you see my horizontal lines aren't exactly horizontal, but it's a freehand sketch, so we're okay. So yeah, so what we'll do here now, we'll draw an I-beam. So it's probably a bit more complicated. So an I-beam is you'll see it's well, it's actually probably more of a universal beam we're going to do, but it's those almost eye-shaped steel beams that you see in buildings. You probably have seen them in other subjects, your building technology, and then when you go to do more structural design projects, you'll actually be learning how to design these in real life. But again, if you're in a kind of client meeting or a meeting with architects, something when you're working, a quick sketch of an I-beam and how it will go together will actually help inform everyone working on a job what things are going to look like. So being able to draw these is going to be quite useful. So again, it's going to be an isometric again. So now this is one where I definitely recommend to kind of use your light shade first of all, then to go over it at the end, because there's a bit more detail to it. So we'll draw our horizontal axis. I think I'll using your back to your 4H, 2H or H pencil. And just twist it around a bit so I get the angles right. Now I want my I-beam to kind of go back a good bit, so I'm not going to make it too tall, so I might even make it a bit smaller than that. So now I'm just going to draw, again, step 1, I'm going to draw the outline crate. So now I've skipped some of the step 3. Once I go over the outline of dark shade, I'm going to do that all at the end. I kind of did it here, but I'll go over this one at the end. But I'll just draw the outline of the I-beam first of all. That's already gone a bit funny. So we're just drawing all these lines, vertical and horizontal lines, just all parallel to each other. I'm drawing it light now for the moment, just so we can see. I'll go over it a bit dark. I'll go over the crate afterwards, just when I actually have it correct, just so you can see it better. But no need for you guys to go over anything until you're actually finished the drawing itself. So a bit of muscle memory, kind of go over the line, go up here. Okay, so there we have our crate. So this back line's a bit darker for a crate line. So we just want this just the general outline. So now we have our crate. What we can start doing is starting to add. There we go. Just make sure we focus in a bit. Okay. So we can start actually adding in details to this. So an I-beam is, you know, it's an I shape. So what we want to do is you want to kind of mark roughly where the center of this line is. So again, you're just going to judge it by eye. So step one, find the center of your front face and just draw a single line, nice and light, going up through the middle. So you can see now we always have almost like the inner line of the actual I-beam. So you have the line going across like this. So usually I-beams are like a couple of mil depth here and a couple of mil on top. So I'm just going to offset either side of this center line. And then my pencil is a bit, could use a sharpen, but I'm too lazy to do it now. But if you need to use, so just draw a line parallel to that center line you drew, and that's going to be the flange of the beam. And we'll go across then now. We're going to just offset the line that's going across the top as well, just about roughly about the same length or the same thickness. And then we'll do the same, we'll just offset the one on the bottom. And then we can just go over the outer line a little bit just so to kind of to start to actually show the shape of it. Hopefully you can actually see this. So I can see my vertical line is not exactly straight, but I'm not going to try too much. So here we have this, and we just bring this down so you can see a bit better the actual I-beam itself. There we go. Okay, so I've just zoomed in a little bit so you can see better. So now I've already seen a bit, not exactly a mistake, but it's this line here isn't exactly vertical, so that's probably something a bit more like, but you know, it's a freehand sketch. Just try and keep an eye on it, so not the end of the world. So we've got the front face of it highlighted. So what we want to do then, we can start actually doing a outline of the lines going back from it. So just go back along the crate. So this is the thickness of the flange here from the top of the underside of it. So we'll just go to the underside of it and just draw that line parallel to the line we just drew. Again, do it light first of all if you're not sure. And a straight line at the end. Okay, it's looking too bad. Then if you're happy enough with it, you can go over it in darker shade. And we'll draw the same thing again. So the bottom line here is going to be the bottom of the flange. Oops. And then from this point here, we're just trying to draw a line parallel to it, just about the same thickness as we have on the front. There we go. And so now we're going to draw some receding lines. So we want to draw the lines going back here. So we've got these lines on this side, but we want to have this one here. This one's obviously this center flange here, so it's going to disappear behind it. So we'll get our line roughly the same angle recessing. So let's bring it back here, and it's going to stop at the flange there. I've kind of gone over a little bit. This is why it's good to kind of do everything light first of all, but I'm just doing it a bit darker so we can all see it. This is already not the nicest one I've ever drawn in my life, but it's okay. Then we'll just draw the line here. So this is the kind of the base of the steel. So draw the back line. It's going to be our internal flange. So now we have a bit more detail so we can see this. We can start rub out the lines on the crate that we don't need anymore. So again, it's freehand sketching, it doesn't have to be perfect, so don't worry about if you're urban stuff out, you need to go over it roughly with your hands. This is only kind of just to get some basic techniques. The more you do this, the better you do it. I did one of these yesterday and it looked a lot better than this one. This one's a bit ropey to be honest, but shows a rough technique. I can see one of the issues here, I think this line actually kind of curved up a little bit, so practice what I preach. I'll rub it out and I'll do it again. So we want to go from here. a little bit better. Again, it's a freehand sketch, so it doesn't have to be perfect, just have to kind of show roughly what you're doing. So now what we can do, once we have a rough shape of it, so we've got rid of our outer line, so then we can start adding in some hatch detail in different bits of colour. So again, it's a steel beam, so it's going to be, well, a lot of times it's going to be a kind of a rust colour, but I'm going to add in my pencil just using kind of a light shade, and I'm going to do it at different angles for different faces, just to kind of give it a bit of extra detail. Maybe for this one here, I'll just do it at a different angle, just to differentiate the page, so to differentiate the face, so it doesn't look like it just went over the whole thing. And this one here is actually the same kind of on the same axis almost as the top one, so you can kind of match this hatching direction to the one on the bottom. And then the same here, and then just the obviously thickness of the flange can just be whatever. So we have our bit of shading there now. So I don't know if you remember, last week we did the hatching for the actual steel. It was actually double lines, like for the brick. If you were doing actual brick, hatching was like kind of single lines like this. But for steel, we're going to use basically we draw 2 lines and a gap, 2 lines and a gap, 2 lines and a bit of a gap. So we can do this. We'll add this hatch kind of slightly over the colour, so try and keep them a bit straight. So it's 2 lines really close to each other. Draw it nice and light so it's not dominating the picture, you don't want to kind of confuse people. So again, I'll just do rough ones in here then. Again, it's kind of, don't have to worry about the spacing to be exactly correct. And then, sure, we lose our kind of our shading. I don't know how much you actually missed of that, but sorry about that. So I just basically drawing these hatch lines in. So I'm just going to actually draw some shading here. Can go dark underneath it, and then kind of come out a little bit lighter. And then the same here. Darker near the object and then a bit lighter as you get away from it. Okay, so here we have our 3 little objects. So we've got our large concrete block, our smaller brick, and then our I-beam. So, they're not the tidiest thing in the world. We're not doing proper full-on technical drawing like we did last semester, so we're going to do that in a few weeks, but it's just good to kind of get a few kind of your practice for your freehand sketching done. So again, it's all just kind of parallel lines using your pencils. So going over it with a light shade first of all, and then at the end, once you're happy with it, we'll go over a dark shade. So I'll just do that now, just to show you how it just improves the thing, and also just improve the submission. When you actually go to scan it, I'll be able to see it better. This isn't the most ideal way to learn to draw online, but just do your best you can. Again, if it doesn't look right, just rub it out and go again. So now we can see our dark outline has actually already kind of made the thing pop a little bit more. So that's what we're going to do today. So we have our drawing our crate, drawing our detailed outline. Once you're happy, go over in a darker shade and then apply your hatching and colour. So we have a brick, a block, and a steel I-beam. So in a few weeks we're going to be drawing a few more of these type of I-beams, so practice on the I-beam if you want. If you've got a bit of free space, you can start drawing a few, maybe draw 1 or 2 small ones there if you want, just for a bit of practice. Maybe you don't have to go into so much detail just to kind of get the outline done. So, but again, when you're drawing these I-beams, always draw the outer crate first of all, and then adding the detail. It's just basically offsetting yourself from the lines of the crate, so it's straightforward enough. So once you got these 3 drawings done, again, just fill in your title block. Again, it's not to scale, so for not to scale you can type in NTS, not to scale if you want, or you can write in, not type in. Again, submit it through Brightspace and we'll have a look at it and I'll give you some feedback. And yeah, next week we'll move on again to last week of freehand sketching before we get back to our proper technical drawing. Okay, so good luck with that.